I think they're closing the doors. That means we have to get started. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come during the lunch hour. My name is Mahesh Prakriya, and I work with Miguel Lopez in our team, and I'm here to talk to you today about how do you integrate data into the common data service. And in particular, there are three things we will cover. The first of which is really overview of common data service and the common data model. And what does that mean? And I think I was handing out some of the CDM mini posters to all of you who came in early. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And I think after that, we'll talk about the data integration for admins. I'll talk about the data integrator and the admin scenarios and demo some of that. And then after that, Miguel's going to sort of showcase a bunch of demos across the board for business users using Power Query. So that's sort of the structure of the presentation. And if you have any questions, happy to take them at the end. And as I mentioned earlier, our entire team is in the expo hall, the booth, whenever we're not speaking. So basically, I intend to hang out there, and the team will be hanging out there. So feel free to come by, even if you miss anything later on, and come by and chat with us as well. So yeah, and I think that's the overview. I mean, is this what you're expecting, approximately? Yeah? Cool. Good. It's always good to be in line with the expectations on that. So let's talk a little bit about where we fit into the bigger picture. The first of which is data integration is really a set of technologies that enable you to get data from multiple and disparate data sources in a common form using the common data model into CDS for apps, and that's one of the first things we'll talk about, and into ADLS V2, the data lake. And the reason to put things in the data lake is to be able to do all kinds of interesting sort of AI and learning and ML scenarios and enrichment of the data right there where the data is, and do in-lake transforms, because you don't want to move large amounts of data out of the lake. And you can then pass on that intelligence into things like Power BI, through which you report, and other mechanisms as well. And we directly, through our connector ecosystem today, provide data connectivity into Power BI. So today we have over 200 plus. By end of the year, I suspect we'll have about 300 connectors across the board if you add them all up in the ecosystem that span everything from like every major data source that's available out there. And that connector model is also extensible, so that if you don't find a specific connector to plug into the ecosystem to get the data, you can actually write a connector in a relatively straightforward and easy manner, so that you can actually go ahead and sort of integrate your data into the ecosystem in a pretty easy way. So why do you get data into the ecosystem? The reason you get data into the ecosystem is to actually make it useful through applications at the end of the day. And we envision two types of applications. There's the dynamics set of applications, which is really about how do you do both sort of sales and ERP and others. And there may be custom applications built on top of CDS. And some of you might have seen this in the keynote, the Dynamics keynote, where Ryan demoed Power Apps, building Power Apps. As part of that, he said, oh, we get 200 data sources, and that's our connector ecosystem. So you can build apps easily through the data ecosystem. Or through Power BI, and Power BI is our needle in the haystack. It shows the needle in the haystack. It's really about providing intelligence over that data. And how do you show more and more so? And I think we're doing tons of innovations, and we're making investments such that Power BI can reason about data using ML integration and a bunch of the others as well. And I think you'll see some elements of that so Miguel will start with on the left side and the demos later. I'll do the admin scenarios of the demos, and then we'll move to Power BI later on in the presentation. So this is the framing of where data integration fits into the overall picture. And what we're going to talk about are elements of each of these pieces, and then we're going to go deeper into the admin scenarios. And then Miguel's going to demo some of the business user scenarios, and then we'll wrap up with a set of pointers for each and every one of the talks that we have as well. So, most of you have seen the Open Data Initiative as part of our keynote, right? I mean, I think part of the foundation for that is something we've been working on for a long time. Through our last release, I was part of the CRM team, where the model that we're developing is really becoming the lingua franca for business applications. So what CDM provides is really a set of entities that are business entities that allow you to actually have some meaning or semantics behind a structured shape and form to that data, which is also extensible, by the way. You can take it and extend it if you so desired. And then, so that you don't have to replicate these. How many of you have islands of data in your organization all over, which is pretty much the same, but just slightly different all over the place? Almost every one of you have that scenario. And the problem with that, the problem with not having a common model, is that you cannot easily reason about customers across different silos. For example, is this the same customer that has visited my website and tried to look up something? Is this the same customer that called my support that I'm actually also trying to sell to? If they had a bad support experience and you're trying to sell to them, you should know that a priori. I think those are the kinds of, these are just two examples. There are tons and tons of examples across the board of these types of scenarios. Second of which is it unifies data. And I think, I mean, it's easy to say that. People are like, yeah, it's a data model. But it's really important, especially in our age where data is increasing exponentially. And it is not about the lack of data. It's about understanding what the data is and finding exactly what you're looking for in a consistent way that is actually the difficult part. And once you find it, how do you know the shape, structure, meaning, the semantics of that data, and for the things that you know about, and how do you reason about them in a consistent format? And that, I think, is really a key problem that we have that we're helping solve. And by starting this initiative across the board, I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And the third benefit that you get as a result of having this common data model, which underlies this Open Data Initiative, is really the ability for the ecosystem, whether it is application ecosystem or libraries or others, to write interesting functionality. So you can actually get a machine learning library that reasons about it, knowing the shape and format of the data and knowing the semantics of the data, so you can actually go ahead and buy these off-the-shelf things to go plug into to make things happen, whether it's apps or libraries or across the board ecosystem to help enable that. So I think these are really key problems, and I think it's almost sort of understated, but I think this is the reason why we really have, actually, I meant to go to the next slide. We really have Adobe and SAP joining us in the keynote, sort of in the Open Data Initiative, and that we are working with them in a very direct way. In fact, our architect is working with them almost on a daily basis to help integrate, both in terms of like, if you look at SAP on the sort of like the finance and other elements in there, and then Adobe on the marketing side and a whole bunch of others that they're pretty strong at. How do you integrate the data models when it comes to Adobe XDM and CDM and make that the Open Data Initiative? By the way, I forgot to mention in the earlier slide, there's a link at the bottom on the GitHub site that you can go to go check out the common data model. So it says CDM poster, but I think it's, let me see if I can just alt-tab to that. So this is basically the GitHub site that you go to if you go to akams/CDM poster. It's got a full PDF of the poster that I handed out, so you can print that out yourself. And we have these small and big posters, 1,000 of them at the booth as well if you want to come by and chat with us. In addition to that, there's actually tooling that helps you view. There's a tool that we will demo in our later talks, not today, in the CDM talk, that helps you view basically the entire sort of schema in an interesting way. I think those are the kinds of things that are available, and everything is being done in an open way to right on sort of GitHub. So I think it's just something that you can take a look at, participate in, and help enable that as well. So that's my pitch on CDM and Open Data Initiative. And so in summary, what you really have as a result of this effort is for business applications, hopefully one data model that you can use with a unified both structure, schema, and semantics. We don't envision that will cover every scenario. It's extensible. So there are cases where you will need to extend it without a doubt. I mean, we're not foolish enough to think that this will solve world hunger. But nevertheless, it's a great place to get started so you don't have to repeat who a customer is, and you don't have to repeat what a sales lead is. So you don't have to repeat many of the things that already exist in the industry as the norms to get started with that. So that's the summary of our overall sort of portfolio. And here are a set of talks that we have across the entire sort of conference, starting with this talk. And what I've just done is the overview, and I'll start going into a deep dive on each of the other areas, like the admin area that I talked about. So in particular, if you're interested in CDM, I'm going to pitch that. Go to the session by Robert and Tessa. Robert is the architect for that. Tessa is the PM, and she does a great job with these talks. So I strongly recommend that and many other talks as well. And the other thing you'll notice is that Miguel's everywhere in all these talks. And so I think it's just, it's really a pleasure to work with Miguel, to be able to do across the board just about anything, to be able to go do that. So he's doing 7 talks at this conference, so you'll see him being pretty tired towards the end of the week.
This is the first one, so it's the only one so far.
He prepares just in time. And OK, so with that, let's talk a little bit about data integration for admins. So I think the first question you have is, why get data into CDS? So how many of you have heard prospect to cache scenario and what that means? Some of you? OK. OK. So let me play this, because I think it underlies sort of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to play the video here.
In this video, we will provide an overview of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Prospect-to-Cache integration. Prospect-to-Cache integration enables sellers to handle and monitor their sales processes with the strength from Dynamics 365 for Sales, while all aspects of fulfillment and invoicing take place using the rich functionality in finance and operations. With the Prospect-to-Cache integration, you get the combined power from both systems. In this video, we will first discuss the key components in data integration. The data integration is enabled with the Dynamics 365 data integration feature, which creates connections between the online versions of sales and finance and operations. The standard templates are developed to support the Prospect-to-Cache integration. It is easy to set up the desired integration. You can control how often you want the synchronization to occur from minutes to months. From the data integration, you can always modify and extend the integration project to fit your needs by modifying the existing mapping from the templates. You can modify the existing field mappings. You can add additional fields to the mapping, and you can even add an additional task to synchronize additional entities. Next, we will give you an overview of the standard Prospect-to-Cache integration between sales and finance and operations. Synchronization between sales and finance and operations is supported with the standard Prospect-to-Cache templates. For account, you can create and maintain accounts in sales, and the information will be synchronized to finance and operations as customers of type organization. For contact, you can create and maintain contacts in sales. Once contacts are related to an account, they will be synchronized to finance and operations as contacts with a link to the customer. If you sell to a contact in sales, It will be synchronized to finance and operations as a customer of type person. For products, you can create and maintain released products in finance and operations, and the products will be synchronized to sales, including a price list item with the base sales price from finance and operations. For quote, you can create quotes in sales and synchronize them to finance and operations. Once activated, they will flow to finance and operations for further processing. For sales order, you can create sales orders in sales and synchronize them to finance and operations. Once activated, they will flow to finance and operations. Updates on the existing sales orders and all new sales orders from finance and operations will be synchronized back to sales, which keeps the seller updated about fulfillment and order status. For invoice, you can invoice sales orders in finance and operations, and the invoice information will be synchronized to sales, which allows the seller to view invoices directly from sales. Thank you for watching. For more information, please search for Prospect to Cash at this website.
And then they live happily ever after.
I knew Miguel would have a joke. Okay. So I think, so does that frame sort of like what it means for data integration prospect? The notion of a sales prospect that hopefully you get the cash after invoicing. And it's the entire sort of how do you make sure, it's all about data at the end of the day. It's not about the application. The data generates the application nowadays, not the other way around. I don't have this on. Okay, this is better. Okay, thank you. I turned it off just so there's not a feedback. And so the point here is that all the way from like an initial sales lead, how do you flow the data is what we're going to show you, and how do you synchronize that data using the administrative tools that we have in the first part of it. So I think there are two examples here. I won't name the customers, but these are very concrete examples where they're using both our D365 CE, customer engagement, also known as CRM, and they're also using D365 Ops, and which is really also known as AX, Dynamics AX. And they really want to make sure that data is sunk up in a way that they can actually serve the customers and really make sure that the end-to-end scenario is taken care of. And I think there are multiple different ways. In the top case, there are actually multiple entities that get synchronized. And in the bottom furniture case, they actually do much more interesting, where the account is split across multiple different entities in AX. And so each of these scenarios, it's doable today. How do you do data integration by, in each of these scenarios, I think is doable. So we'll show some elements and examples of that. So now we talked about why would you want to get data into CDS. You get data into CDS such that as a whole, your application is multiple different applications are executing as if it's one. This is unified data. And then the kind of data that you can get in there are basically the finance and ops data into CDS, D365. And in addition to that, we also have tons of sort of sources through Power Query, which Miguel will demo quite a bit today. And an example of that, by no means the only one, is Salesforce. For example, your sales data doesn't necessarily have to be part of Dynamics 365. Your sales data may be in Salesforce, but you're using our AX for actually finance and ops, in which case, how do you synchronize that data? I'll show you some of the templates that we have that enable you to do that. And that's only one example. There are 20 plus other data sources that you can get data from as well. And I think in addition to that, if you are Salesforce customer and thinking of transitioning to CRM, you can get the data as well through the same connector and data integration experience that we have on, hey, I want to transition to Microsoft CRM, and I want to start with this data to test it out and try it out. And you can go ahead and suck the data out and go enable it and help make that happen as well. So I think these are scenarios that we enable on that. So OK, now comes how do you get data into CDS. I'll show you a few slides and do a quick demo. And then I will hand off to Miguel as well. So the data integration platform has these concepts called templates. Templates are about how do you map between different entities and different fields in the entities, because unfortunately, we're not yet in this world where all data is sort of unified. We ourselves are working in Microsoft to unify that, but we'll provide you an experience that's unified so that you don't have to worry about it. And so we provide these templates out of the box, and I'll show you the examples of those templates. In addition to that, you create these connection set, which are really a connection information both on the source side, the environment on the source side, and the connection information on the destination side, and the environment on the destination side. You take all of that, and you create a data integration project, and then you schedule it. You execute it right then, or you can schedule it as well. And that's really the summary of the entire sort of technology that we have. And so typically, we see customers scheduling these things to synchronize data in their organization. And I think typically, you can schedule it whatever sort of frequency that you care about. That's Sabine, our PM that's responsible for this domain, and I'm doing the talk on his behalf. And so the templates, for example, look like this, and I'll show you in the demo as well. So basically, the templates are relatively straightforward, out-of-the-box templates, but you can customize them. You can add mapping and say, hey, I want to go ahead and this Salesforce entity and in this field in Salesforce really should map to this. For example, there are differences in the semantics of the data between how strong a lead is in the sales data for Salesforce and what it means on the Microsoft CRM side of it. So you can map these entities and in the way that you care about and you choose. And then after that, you can create your own template and you can go ahead and publish it as well. So pretty soon, as of end of October, we'll be releasing a feature that allows you to publish a template across your organization. Right now, you can take it and customize it and use it yourself as an admin, but you cannot really publish it in your org, and we'll provide that ability as well. And with Power Query integrated into the experience, what you get is really a pretty strong ability to transform data while you're doing that as well, if you so choose. For example, if you wanted to create conditional columns as an example, or if you wanted to join with other data, or if you want to bring in other data, Power Query provides some pretty strong functionality to help enable you to do that. And then we talked about some examples of this, and I think there are tons of functionality, like the date function is a sort of a great example of that in Power Query, and you'll see some demos of this. The filtering, I think, is a very powerful functionality. It's a very Excel-like. By the way, Power Query that you see in this tooling is the same Power Query engine and infrastructure, even though this one is the online version of it, that's in Excel. And down the road, it'll be a unified sort of complete experience across all of these. So the same Power Query Online that you'll be using here is the same one if you go to the Data tab and do Get Data. It is our tooling that ships as part of Excel as well. So I think it's the same functionality on that. So let me do a quick demo. Thank you. OK. So what you see here is admin.powerapps.com is where you need to go as an administrator. And what you see here is a set of data integration projects that you have. You can always go ahead and create a new project if you so desired. And we don't have to, because I'm just going to show you what it means to create a new project. And then initially, what you get asked is actually, I'll just say here, Ignite demo. And you get all kinds of templates that are out of the box, ready to start. So in this case, so this is a template that goes from sales to finance and ops. Or you might choose and say, look, my sales data is in Salesforce. What I really want to do is get that data into CDS. By the way, CDS is a common data service. That is, so how CDS and CDM relate, or CDM is the model that defines the common data service. So CDM is just the model part, and CDS is really an instance of that model. This is how you should think about it. And so you can get data from any of these. I'll just go ahead and sort of select the first one, and then you can go ahead and create next. I'm going to get out of this as well. And then you select a connection set, and then you just create the project. So for the purposes of this, I'll just go ahead and cancel out of here, and then show you the recent projects that I've created. And then in some of these, you can go ahead and sort of run them, or you can go ahead and schedule them as well. So let's take a look at SFDC, the Salesforce one. And here, you're getting data from Salesforce into our CRM. And maybe you want to just test it out and see how that works. And this map function here is the template. So on the left side is the Salesforce entity and attributes. And on the right side is the destination field that it maps to. So you start out, we provide you out of the box with a predefined set of mappings that we believe make sense for you, but you're completely able to edit it. You say, look, facts in my system is completely different in my schema, and I want to map it to something else. Or address is typically canonically the case that that people have different sort of mappings that they want to go ahead and pick. So I think what you can do is you can completely customize it, and then you can even add conditional columns and new columns associated with that you create as part of that. So in the interest of time, I'm actually going to go ahead and sort of, and by the way, you can also do Power Query as part of this, which is what this is bringing up is the ability on the source data to use Power Query, which is our querying tool. Here, what you see here is an example of the source data, and then you can actually go ahead and sort of, bring up even the advanced editor that we have, which is the underneath Power Query that powers all of this is what we call the M language, which enables you to write very interesting expressions to go map that. You don't have to do any of this. You can use the GUI itself to go do whatever the work that you need to. But if you're so interested, you can go ahead and sort of extend this because Power Query supports about 300 transforms, some of which are supported in the UX, and some of which are actually available only through code as of today. So I think what you can do is you can customize it to whatever form. I'm going to cancel it. I'm not going to customize anything. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. Actually, you can see the execution history here as well. It ran it, and then you can say, I want to go ahead and rerun this, and then it will submit it. And it's basically, it's submitted, and it's going to start running, and we'll transfer over the data from Salesforce into CRM. So while I'm at it, let's take some examples of things that are error conditions and how we handle them. I think either one, I'll pick this one for now, and then see if I can drill into the execution history and then say, why is this error? I think there's a project validation step in that, which is really, there's some error in the project. And then you can double click on it and say, okay, so you can actually get some, all the way to the error reports to go fix things if you needed to. And while scheduling it, you can even email yourself if there are any errors on a regular basis as well. So I think that's the summary of the data integration admin functionality. And I think just basically go ahead and sort of run with each of these. And I think it's easiest to go ahead and play with that. And then you can either run the project, which will only do the deltas or the changes if you ran it already before. For example, I just ran the SFDC to CRM. Or you can rerun it with all the data. By default, if you ran it before, there's change tracking turned on our CRM and the X systems to only look at the deltas and the changes, and it will only worry about the changes. Or you can say, look, I want to rerun the whole thing again. You can do that, or you can go ahead and schedule it, and on and on and on. So it's a pretty powerful functionality. You can go ahead and schedule that and say, notify me if there are any errors or warnings, and on and on. So I recommend that you play with this. It's pretty interesting. And to get started, all you need to do is go ahead and create a project. And in creating a project, you just need to set up some connections. And here I've set up some Salesforce connections and also Dynamics 365 connections from both the source to the destination. And then I use that in the context of the connection set, which is I provided the source connection information plus the environment. I can show you each of these. And then these are my connection sets that are available, and then you can use that from there. You can also right-click on the dashboard here, and you can see the details of how things ran, and go ahead and edit. And then, for example, you can see the records here, and then say, give me what happened with this this past week's set of runs. And it will say, here are the things that ran at these times, and if there are any errors, it will show you, and then you can actually go ahead and sort of click and preview that as well. So that's the summary of it. I went through it in a pretty whirlwind because I wanted to make sure, I told Miguel about a half an hour, and I wanted to make sure that we are, if you can go back to 5, we're going through that. But I think it's easiest if you just set it up and play with it and integrate data from different sources. And one of the things I haven't shown you is how to integrate anything beyond AX or CRM or Salesforce, but you can actually use any of our connectors in Power Query to go get other data as well to integrate as part of that and to morph and slice and dice, and you'll see some demos of that as well. So that's the summary on the admin side, and I think on the power user side, you'll see basically on the business user side, you'll see demos from Miguel for the rest of it, and I'll come back up at the end and answer any questions. Thank you so much.
So actually, before going into the next section for business users, you guys have any questions? Well, this is top of mind, so we can, yeah. go ahead.
So it's all sort of whatever the infrastructure that you have in the cloud that's running it, right? I think the versions that are supported are CRM 8.9 on CRM Online 8.9, and then AX Cloud. So whatever you provisioned is really what it's about. Yes.
Now here.
What about integration in complex entities like invoice, lines, products?
Yes.
Not just single like customer to customer, but more complex entities.
Yes, our templates actually provide the ability. You can actually, let me go back and show you. Nope, that's not it. It's still in the connection sets. So at the project. And what you can do here is in this add task item, you can actually, just name a few, you can select a set of entities that you, in turn, you can actually tear it apart, and you can go ahead and store it in multiple different places as well on the destination side. And so all of that is provided, and I think Power Query also helps you with that as well. So if you need to slice and dice data, it's all doable. Then you can save that template once and say, this is my template, and you can even publish that starting November into your organization and say, hey, this is our template for our organization, so that it's easier to share that as well.
Question on the back. Yeah.
So there's caveat. For admin integration scenarios, it is really the online, CRM Online that's supported, but through the connector ecosystem, through the gateway, you can get it online for the other data. Did that make sense or no? So give me a scenario. So the short answer is no. Yes, I'm sorry, but it's mostly the online build. If it's the ERP system, no.
So the template would not allow you to get data from on-prem with predefined mappings. But if you go use the Power Query Online capabilities, particularly with ERP, you could consume data from the OData endpoint, shape it the way you want, and do that through the on-prem gateway.
That's correct.
But there's no out-of-the-box templates because those are heavily customized. It's not like the Dynamics Online versions.
So you have to do work in defining your template using Power Query through the data connector with the gateway turned on to be able to do that. It's doable. And it's actually just a little bit more work, not as much, but yes. But not out of the box. This is one of the things we're thinking through in helping improve the experience for the admins as a whole.
There's a question down here.
Yes, go ahead. The short answer is today, there's not an easy way to share these templates, but we're doing a release at the end of October, where this is exactly one of the key feature asks that we're working on. So starting in November, you'll see that. And there are other technologies we're working on as well that will help improve the experience, but I'm not at liberty yet to talk about those because I want to make sure that we deal with them first, and then I'll talk about them in the team.
I think there was a question on that side.
Yes, sir, in the back. Yes. Yeah, you can set up, for each project, it is a given environment. So you can set up multiple different projects and say, that's what a connection set is. Connection set is connection information plus the environment that you want to sync up. And you can say project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, and you can set those up and schedule them as well. It's provided as part of that. Any other questions? Yes. I didn't hear, I'm sorry. So is there, there's nothing in particular that we do other than what the default security is. It's really under the set of sort of credentials that you provide. It's in Azure, so it's, I mean, it's about as secure as it gets. But is there something in particular you're thinking of, or? Yes. Sure. So I think, I mean, there are two parts to it. There's the data movement and the access sort of like that you give to your users. And what I've shown you is the admin scenario where they have the full access and they can move the data and integrate the data. And then your access control is completely up to you to go ahead and sort of give access to whatever the information that they need on the destination side. For example, you move from Salesforce, you'd want to think a little bit about some of the user permissions as well as to what access you give to whom, and go ahead and sort of design that up front. And I'm happy to chat with you more if you have more details on this offline. Miguel's always got cool demos. He's a demo god, so I'll step aside for a little bit.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, Mahesh. So we'll focus for the next about 38, 37 minutes on the data integration capabilities for business users. And if you remember that diagram that we showed at the beginning, we're going to talk about one of the purple boxes on top of a common data service for apps. And then we're also going to show you on the Power BI side how you leverage this data and create data flows to do analytics. With that said, just a little recap on a bunch of things that Mahesh already mentioned. Data integration capabilities that we provide built into the common data service for apps are based on Power Query Online. It's a much newer version of Power Query that what we've had in desktop for the last few years in Excel and Power BI. How many of you regularly use Power Query in desktop today, either Power BI desktop or Excel through the data tab? Okay, quite a few folks. So for those of you, you'll feel pretty much at home with these new capabilities because right now it's kind of a subset, and we're growing towards full parity with Power Query in desktop over the next, hopefully, half year to a year. There's a lot of features we've been adding to Power Query in desktop, so it's a big mountain to climb, but we're halfway through at least. We provide connectivity to about 20 data sources right now, which I have in the next slide. And in terms of transforms, Mahesh mentioned the underlying engine, the mashup engine, is the same across desktop and service. So everything that you like copy-paste a query or copy-paste a transform, it will just run fine. There will be some things that you do not have yet the user experience on top. A good example of that would be if you use something like column from examples in desktop. We don't have a column from examples experience on the web, but we're working on it. What else do we do in terms of built-in capabilities for data integration? As the question that came up earlier about getting to on-premises data, we actually do that through the on-premises data gateway. This is the same gateway that you use for Power BI or Power Apps or Flow or Logic Apps or Azure Analysis Services. You can also use it in this context. And remember, here we are bound to your Common Data Service for Apps account. So it's if you're already using Power Apps and you've configured some connections, you could also leverage those same connections here. The last couple points here, we talked a lot about CDM and the Open Data Initiative. Through the Power Query Online experience, I'm going to also show you how you can map from a data source schema to an actual definition of an entity in the common data model. So you can stick to that out-of-the-box predefined schema that we provide so that then you can leverage additional capabilities just on top, just because you're going to a well-known schema for us, so we can give you richer capabilities. The last one here, the last point, is about schedule refresh. This is something that we just added a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to show you what the experience looks like as well. With all that said, we talked about that, so let's go and do a bunch of demos. Just before we get into the demos, one apology that I'm going to be using Chrome. The reason I'm going to show you Chrome is because if you use Edge, it's actually so nice that when you open a new tab, it gives you a bunch of news, including your favorite team's results. And actually, my favorite soccer team, Atletico Madrid, is playing right now. So I don't want to know the score. I'm recording it. I'll watch it tonight. That's the only reason why I'm using something other than Edge. With that said, let's get going. So bear with me as we use Chrome. So I'm looking right now at the Power Apps portal, the Power Apps Maker portal. How many of you already use Power Apps? OK, you're familiar with this portal. So you've probably seen the data group in here. And if you open that, you see a few things. You see all of your existing entities already in the entities list. or a spinner for a long time, and then you see the entities. So here's all the entities that you have that we've predefined. Some of them are also custom, so you can see by type we have custom and standard entities. So there's a few preloaded custom ones that I've created up front. You can actually go to the data integration tab, and here is where you'll come to actually create some of the data integration, more complex projects. You could also do, from the entities tab, you could also get straight into get data, either by doing a one-time upload of an Excel file through get data from Excel, or if you do get data, it will actually, by default, create a data integration project behind the scenes. But you could come to the data integration tab to see the full list, which, as you can see, I have really meaningful names of projects, so I can find my way back. But let's go create a new one. So it's a new data integration project, and we're going to get you into the Power Query Online experience from here. So for those of you familiar, this is the equivalent to the Get Data screen in Power BI Desktop. We have about 20, 25 sources right now compared to the 85 plus we have in Power BI Desktop. As I said, we're working our way to parity, so we'll get there. The first thing I'm going to show you is to just very simple. I'm going to connect to an Excel file that's in OneDrive. I'm going to show you what the file looks like. And we're going to reshape this data. So we have some data in here with, the first row says Seattle, Portland, Vancouver. It looks like, regions or cities that we have some data for. Then we have bikes, accessories, miscellaneous. So these are like product categories. And then we have a bunch of years and a bunch of numbers in the intersection. So we as humans, because we're so smart, we know that for example, cell B3, that 23,432 number, we understand that this probably means sales for bikes category in Seattle in 2002, right? So that's very intuitive, but this is not in any ways in a machine-readable format like you would put in a database, for example. So we are going to use Power Query to actually clean this data and then properly load this into the common data service. And how many of you have actually tried loading a file sitting in OneDrive into Power Query, either Power BI or desktop? And how many of you have actually struggled to do it? OK, yeah. So if you try to do it, and you come to the OneDrive UI, it's really nice. You can right-click and say copy link. If you do that and use that link, it's not going to work. You could also do open in Excel online. So if you come here, you have this other link. If you copy that, it's not going to work either. So the easiest way to actually get to the file is you open it in Excel desktop, and then you go to the file backstage, and you click here, and then you do copy path to clipboard. Once you do that, and you come back, and you select Excel, and you paste that, if I click next, it's not going to work either. Because you need to remove the last parameter here, this web equals 1 with a question mark thing. Now it should work. And we do credentials. I'm already signed in with my organizational account, my AD account. When I click next, it should work, hopefully, unless my friend Murphy is coming to my session instead of watching the Atletico Madrid game. But it did work, so he's watching the game probably. Just so you know, this is the same thing you would do in either Excel or Power BI. And we're working on fixes for this. So we're working on an experience to browse, right from within the Power Query experience, browse for OneDrive contents. So you can actually get the actual file without having to copy-paste stuff from here and there. But once we've made our way here, this is very consistent experience with the one in desktop. This is equivalent to the Navigator UI in Power Query in the desktop. You can just find the interesting elements. In this case, there's this one, sheet one, and you can preview it. You can select it, and then you can click next. And then we're going to go into the edit queries or the query editor UI. So here's where we're going to do all of our data preparation steps, all of our data transformations. The first thing we need to do here is to actually turn columns into rows or rows into columns. So for that, you can use transpose. It's going to kind of flip that by 90 degrees. And now it's starting to look better, but we still have, the first row here is this number, so it's actually the years. So what we need to do is use that first row as the column headers. And now we are starting to look better. We can clean up these column names. So this is category. Great. So now we have these two columns here with city and category. And the rest of columns, we have one per year with the actual values. And of course, we would like that next year, when we refresh this data integration project and a new row or some new data is being added to that Excel online spreadsheet with data for 2018, we would like that data to come in as well, right? So to do that, we need to use unpivot, which is under transform column, and pivot the other columns. So it's basically saying all columns except those first two, unpivot them, turn them into rows, and it's going to give us this format. So we have attribute and value, which is basically attribute is the year column, and then value is the total sales on that year. So next year, when we refresh this file, we're going to see a new row that will say Seattle by X 2018 and some number, hopefully a really huge, large number, because we're doing well in our business. But that's how you do in pivot, so it's that easy. Let's actually go rename this. So this is actually our total sales by year. And from here, we can actually also adjust some of the column types. So let's say this is a text column. So is city. Year should actually be a whole number. And total sales, it's a currency. Great. So once we've done all of that, if you're familiar with Power Query, you'll know all of this, but I'm just going to call out a few things. You have applied the steps here on the side. If you paid attention to that, you notice that we were adding one step at a time. You could actually go back and almost like replay a movie here. So you go back to a step, you see what the preview, the output, the results look like at that point. You could even come back and make changes to this, either to the formula bar, or in some cases you get this icon to change some of the things we configured along the way. You could also access, as Mahesh pointed out, the advanced editor. And this will give you access to the underlying M code. So M, not the spinny, but the actual text that will come up on screen. There we go. So this is M code. So M is the underlying query language behind Power Query, and it allows you to query data uniformly across all of these data sources. So it doesn't really matter if you're connecting to an Excel file like we did, or a SQL Server database, or an SAP system, or Dynamics. M and the connectors that we build on top of M will take care of actually pushing down as many operations as possible, like depending on the backend capabilities. If you do a group by against SQL, so it will generate a group by statement. If you do a filter against an OData endpoint, so we'll do an OData filter clause. But the experience we provide, the transforms that we provide, is consistent across all of these sources, and you can even very easily combine data across all of them using things like merge queries, which is a join in database terms, or append, which is like a union, so adding rows. We're doing actually a deep dive session into Power Query on Thursday morning, I believe. It's one of the sessions in our slides, so we'll go back to that later if you want to learn more about Power Query. OK, so now that we've done a few transforms, we can go hit the next button. Actually, before doing that, let's actually go get some more data. I'm going to do more PQ magic here. So I'm not going to show on-prem because I'm not set up, but I'm going to show you Azure SQL database. And in here, you can actually just go in and provide the server name. So that's going to be something like this. The moment I did that, did you notice that it popped in my username and the password? This is because it's already been stored in my profile. But otherwise, I could configure it here. So I could provide basic username, password credentials. If this was an on-prem source, I could select one of my gateways here. And my gateways from Power BI and Power Apps are automatically showing up here by default. I'll leave it as none because it's a cloud-based database. It's an Azure SQL database. The moment I hit DAX, we're going to give you a very similar experience to the one you saw with the Excel file, except that here we're actually going to show you databases within this server. I have two. And then if I expand the database, I'm actually going to see also the tables. So I can click saleslt.customer. And I can also pick the order headers. So let's pick those two, and we'll get the previews for them. And we can just select more than one. So let's just move on. And then we land back in the query editor. So now I have 3 queries here. And let's go and do some transforms. So we are in the sales order header table. So here, we're going to subset the number of columns. So what I'm after is just showing the customer table with the top 10 customers, the top 10 most paying customers. And for that, we start with the sales order one. I'm going to subset this, just choose columns. And I'm going to pick just a couple of them. So I'm going to pick the customer ID. And I'm also going to pick something that's called total due. So those two, and it looks something like this. And now that I just have a customer ID, which I'm going to then join with the other table, I can do a group by operation. So I can right-click on customer ID and say I want to do total sales. Oops, sorry, I mistyped that. You can edit, so I demoed edit as well. You can pick a different operation, like a sum. And for column, in this case, I want the sum of total due and group by the customer ID. Once I do that, it's going to show me the aggregated number, so 1 row per customer. Now let's go back to the saleslt.customer table. Here we also have a bunch of columns that I don't need. So let's start by, for example, picking these 5 columns with title, first name, middle name, last name, and suffix. And let's just combine them into one single column. That's a full name for this customer. So let's go into merge columns. We want to space delimiter, and then we'll say this column is going to be full name. And it's that easy to just combine 5 columns into one. Now let's go and pick only a subset of these columns. So we'll pick the customer ID, the full name, the company name, and then the email address. Remove the others. And now let's go and do join with the other table, with the order headers or the total by customer. So we're going to use merge queries. And the experience is very simple, actually. You just select the right table. So we're already merging with the customer table. We're picking sales order header and which columns to use to compare. You could also pick different types of joins, so left outer, so all the rows from the first table and the matching ones from the right, and all of the combinations for merge. There's a really nice picture with multiple Venn diagrams that explain all of the join types. But we'll stick to left outer join for this demo. So once we do that, we get this new column that basically will give us all of the matching rows from the right table, sales order header, that match that specific customer ID here. And we can go and expand the results here. So if we look at this menu, it's going to give us the 2 columns from the other table that we got matches for. So in this case, we're just going to bring total sales. And we don't need a column name prefix. We'll just do total sales. And this is going to propagate or lift that total sales number or total sales column to be a top-level column. We got a bunch of nulls because we didn't have all of these customers. Some of them didn't make purchases. So that's why we don't have, or we have some with null. We can sort descending. And once we do that, we're going to see the top ones. So now we have, 119 million is like the top customer, this Mr. Terry, hey minister guy with purchasing bicycles. So now let's go and reduce rows. We could do keep top rows. And we're going to say keep the top 10. And there we go. So that's our top 10 most paying customers. So let's actually go rename this table. Top 10 paying customers. OK, so we've combined the results in this one. We don't need to load this one right now anymore. So we're going to disable load for that query. It was an intermediate query. And then we have total sales and the top 10. Let's actually go and load those 2 into the common data model, into the common data service. When I click next, we go into the next screen. This is actually going to give us the mapping UI. This is where you say, for each of the queries that we generated, how you want to load them into the common data service. You have 3 options. Not loading them, which is what we're going to do for the last one. So all order headers is do not load. For the other 2, you could say either load to an existing entity, and these are from the list of entities that I showed you at the very beginning in the Power Apps portal. It's a combination of custom entities that have already been defined, and also the standard or CDM-based entities. We could say load to new. So just to show you, these are all of the predefined entities, including CDM entities. And I'm going to show you later on a demo on the mapping, so I won't do that now. But you could do load to new entity if you want to create something fully customized. So this is the total sales. So we could give it a description. So say some description. When you create a new entity in the common data service, you need to provide what the key field is, which in this case, I don't really have a good one, but I guess let's say year. And for primary name, I don't have a good one either. So let's actually switch to something more interesting, like this one. Here we can do also load to new entity, and we say we love these customers, right? Because they pay us a lot of money. And then we can pick the key field. In this case, I do have a customer ID. And for the primary name field, I'm going to pick the company name. And once we do that, we're all set in terms of defining the mappings. We can go click next. And that's going to ask us about the refresh setting. So this is the screen that I mentioned we just added like a week or 2 ago. And you have two options: refresh manually, so basically do not define the schedule refresh, and it will mean that you could always go back to that list of data integration projects and manually say rerun or refresh this project. Or you could say refresh automatically. So when you do that, you could say refresh. Maybe we say refresh every 1 day, starting at today at 5:30 UTC. So in about 3 minutes, I guess. And then you could create the project. So creating a project will actually run the project one time, one initial time to define those, in this case, those 2 new custom entities, and it will populate the results into the common data service. And from there on, it will just continue running on this schedule. Okay, so with that, this will start loading, but let's actually switch gears to a second demo. And to do that, now we are going to switch gears to a Power BI data flow. So let me actually show you this diagram again as a refresher. So what we've shown you so far in this session are the purple boxes. So we've shown you how to get data into CDS for apps across first-party Dynamics 365 apps using data integration for admins. And we've also shown you from the Power Apps Maker portal how you can get data from other random sources like an Excel file or a SQL Azure or Azure SQL database and many other sources. Now I'm going to switch gears to the yellow boxes, and I'm going to show you how you can start leveraging this data from Power BI. So for that, I'm going to switch to a different tab here. So I'm sitting in Power BI, and I'm in this very special tenant that already has enabled the data flows preview. So data flows, Power BI data flows, how many of you have heard about it? Okay, a few of you. Power BI data flows allows you to define ETL jobs to actually load data right from Power BI into Azure Data Lake storage, ADLS. ADLS Gen 2, to be more precise. It's currently in private preview. We'll have a couple other sessions later this week about this capability, and it will go into public preview hopefully sometime in October, or still exact date TBD, but it's coming soon. Let's actually go and start defining data flows. So you can come to, you're probably familiar with this view if you've used Power BI today, where you have, for a given workspace, you have a list of dashboards and reports and data sets. We're adding a new tab for data flows. And you can go to the Create menu, and there's be a new option for creating a data flow. And from here, you can start adding new entities. And when you do that, surprisingly, you're going to get the same Power Query Online Get Data experience. It's very consistent with the experience that I just showed you from the Common Data Service for Apps data integration point of view, except we're adding a new option here, which will soon also come to the data integration experience that I showed you for Common Data Service, which is a Salesforce template. This contains the connections through Power Query to Salesforce, and to actually start pulling a bunch of entities. I think we do 7 or 8 entities. We're going to see them in a little bit. And it also contains a bunch of data preparation steps and mappings. So these are actually mapping Salesforce entities into a CDM schema. The first thing I need to do is sign in with my Salesforce account. So we're going to do the usual OAuth DEMS. OK, so now I'm signed in. And if we click Next, we're going to go straight into the query editor view, where you can actually preview the output of each of those queries. And as you can see, we do about 8: account, and user, and opportunity. And we do a bunch of applied predefined steps. So we do a lot of things like removing some fields from Salesforce that aren't relevant on the other side. We do some fix apps of values. And at the end of all, we do the mapping. Let me actually show you. Won't do that. I'll show you later. At this point, I'm ready to just click Next. It's a confirmation. I preview my data, looks good. And now if I click Done, it's actually just going to create the definition of those entities in my data flow, in my current data flow project here. So now I see all of those entities already defined, and I can go and save this data flow and say Salesforce demo at Ignite, and give it a very meaningful description, and then I'll click Next, save. OK, I'll give it that one description. OK. See, this is why I don't like using Chrome, but for some reason this button is not really clicking. Now it clicked, OK. Now it's spinning. Okay, so now it's actually going to save that definition, and I could go and create a schedule to refresh that data set. Sorry, that data flow. Let me actually cancel out. What's going on here? Let's kick that off. Okay, so now it worked. From here, I could either refresh now or set up a schedule. Yes, I wanted to save my changes. I told you 5 times. Okay, so the last demo that I want to show you is to actually get data from the Common Data Service for Apps into a Power BI data flow. So let me find my way back to my data flow authoring UI. Okay, so we are in the same place we were. We actually have the Salesforce demo data flow in there. Let's actually go create another one. We're going to go add new entities. And in this case, we're going to pick one connector that it actually did not show up in the Common Data Service for Apps experience, which is the Common Data Service for Apps connector, so you can extract data from the Common Data Service into data flows. The experience here, it asks you for your server URL, your Dynamics endpoint. This is another one of those really hard to find URLs. So I'm going to show you where to go find that. And by the way, this other project completed just fine. We're going to go to Settings in the Power Apps portal and Advanced Customizations. You need to go all the way to the bottom to Developer Resources. And then you get to this Resources page, which actually re-authenticates you again. And then you need to copy one of these, which is actually not easy to copy. You can copy that, and then you need to stripe out some, so you end up with a URL like this. You're probably more familiar with Dynamics than I am, but it took me a while to actually figure it out. There's actually an article that explains how to get to that. That explains what I just did here step by step. So go Google that, I guess. So if we switch back here, and I type in my server URL, I'm already signed in again because I just tried this earlier today, but I'm signed in with my organizational account. Then we click Next, and we're going to go query your Common Data Service for Apps instance. And we're going to show you 3 buckets. We have Common Data Model-based entities, and then we have custom entities, and then we have the system or underlying entities. Let's see if my custom entities that I just created are here. My top 10 paying customers is here, so let's pick that one. This is an example. And then let's also pick something that we loaded before as a CDM entity. I think I have my users table here, system user. So I'm going to pick that one. And I'm going to click Next. So now I have these 2 queries. And I'm going to show you actually how to map. And this is kind of a no-op, but I'm going to show you the mapping screen in the data flows experience to map to CDM as well, which in this case is going to look very simple because so if we click map to standard here, this new transform in the toolbar, it's actually going to allow me to pick an entity from CDM. It's called user. And it actually looks so simple because we do auto mapping based on column names and types. And in this case, because I'm mapping from already in CDM shape entity, which was system users, to a user CDM entity definition, is just a one-to-one mapping. But you could actually come in here and change that mapping or do it for any other source table. But once you do that, it's going to define that mapping step. And it will just look like this. And you saw how the entity type now says user. And this will give you a little bit more information about what that is. But then you can click Done, and it's going to create that same entity with that CDM schema, in this case in the Power BI data flows, so in Azure Data Lake. So I have these 2, and I could do the same save and scheduled refresh in there. So that's the end of the demo portion. I could keep going on and on with Power Query demos, but kind of not the main focus of the session. We'll have another session on the Power Query later this week. So I think now it's a good time to actually do any questions on the data flows part or the Common Data Service for Apps for business users part. All good? Okay, good. That's clear. So just recapping on the session goals, we did an overview of a Common Data Service and the Common Data Model. We showed you the experiences for integrating data from admins and business users. Then we show you also a sneak peek on the upcoming Power BI data flows capabilities and how to synchronize between both as well. Please evaluate the session. And here's a reminder about the sessions. I know some of you took pictures about this earlier. So we have quite a few sessions. The CDM session is tomorrow, I believe, tomorrow at noon, 12:45. So I recommend you to go to that one to learn more about CDM. And we'll have more sessions on Power Query, the gateway, and a few other things throughout the week, mostly ending on Thursday. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the week, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.